Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kimberly White. I'm a proud PLNU alumnus, and I have the privilege of working in the Office of Alumni Relations. I'm so grateful to those who have helped us prepare for today's Loma Talk, and I'm especially thankful for all those tuning in, choosing to gather with us during this lunch hour. This summer, the Alumni Office has teamed up with our alumni board members to bring you our summer road trip series, where we are connecting with our university community, both virtually and in person, all across the nation. We're joined today by our Northern California Regional Representative, Alex Moore, who I will introduce you to in just a moment, and who will later share some information about this weekend's meetup in the Bay Area. Before we get into today's talk with Jessica, I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of quick announcements. Throughout our time together, feel free to utilize the chat box, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. Jessica will take those questions at the end of the talk, and we'd love to converse with one another. This session is being recorded, and it will be available for future viewing on the PLNU Alumni YouTube channel. All right, so I'd now like to bring up Alex Moore, who will kick us off today and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Kimberly. Yes, my name is Alex, and I am the regional rep for the NorCal region. And I'm super excited to get to introduce our speaker today, Jessica Bird Beza. The reason I'm so excited is she's a good friend of mine. We actually were students together at Point Loma, theater students and music students together. And so it's really kind of cool. Jessica, I'm so excited to have you here. And she's had a really exciting career since Point Loma. So I'm just going to take a second, read her bio, and then introduce her. So Jessica has served as Executive Artistic Director of Playwrights Foundation in San Francisco since October 2019, and has held leadership positions at the Old Globe, La Jolla Playhouse, San Diego Rep, and Mo'olelo. Jessica is committed to community building, fostering diverse artists, and advancing the new play field. She was the associate director on the Tony Award-winning new musical Come From Away, really exciting. If you haven't seen that or heard that music, you got to. And developed new work at TheaterWorks Silicon Valley, American Conservatory Theater, the Old Globe, La Jolla Playhouse, San Diego Rep, Diversionary Theater, Seattle Repertory Theater, Ford's Theater, among others. She's received an MA in Nonprofit Leadership and Management from USD and Bachelor's of Arts in Theater and Music from Point Loma. So again, Jessica, super excited to have you here. And
hi, Alex.
Hi. It's also, I was so excited. Jessica moved up to the Bay Area in 2019, just like 20 minutes from me. And it's been like the coolest thing to reconnect. So yeah, that's the first thing I'm going to say. But as I introduce you, Jessica, would you just start off by kind of sharing a little bit about your journey at PLNU? And oh, my cat is joining us.
I think cat and children are my favorite part of Zoom, I'll be honest.
Anyway, would you just tell us a little bit about your journey at PLNU and also post-college, kind of what led you to where you are in your career now, and yeah, just go from there.
Yeah, of course. And excited to have this conversation with you today, Alex. Yeah, so I came out to Point Loma from Kansas. So, you know, I looked at all the Nazarene schools and I'm like, I want to come out to the ocean and go to PLNU. And they also had like a great music and theater program, because that has always been something I've been like deeply interested in, is both music and theater. So yeah, I was that like kid who was like always in a rehearsal or two at like any given point at Point Loma, and where my roommates would be like doing biology, I'd be like in the music halls, like rehearsing music and various things. But yeah, I think it's always been, I think, what's kind of gotten me through life, like the good and the bad. And then I wanted to devote my life to it because I think having your work be your passion is something that is like deeply important to me. And when I graduated from Point Loma, I mean, I lived in San Diego for 12 years and worked in theater in San Diego. And I know some students may like watch this, and I just always tell folks, you know, like when I graduated, I just tried to, you know, start out it like interning or like getting fellowships like anywhere I could, and started to make, you know, relationships. And like in the first year out of college, you know, had done an internship at the Old Globe and La Jolla Playhouse and San Diego Rep. And those relationships are what kind of led me to get the work that I did later, because for anybody who works in the theater industry and knows, like, it is often about the relationships that you build and about, you know, the experience that, you know, you can just get working on the job, and like just really, I think, observing people. And so, yeah, I did that. I assisted everywhere, you know, and I also was like, I really want to continue to like work in artistic departments and be a director and be a producer. And, you know, started out as a casting director at San Diego Rep. And, you know, but people just kind of kept offering my names to other places. So like 5 years after interning at like San Diego Rep and like La Jolla Playhouse and the Old Globe, I was like producing at these places, which I think was just like exciting, and wearing a lot of different hats, which is also what I was producing at La Jolla Playhouse at like the right time and place when they were looking for an assistant director on Come From Away, which is the Broadway musical I worked on. And, you know, worked with Christopher Ashley, the director. And that was like the beginning of a 3-year relationship in which I was working on that show for like 3 years, traveling to 5 different cities, and then was in New York City with it for like 7 months and lived there. And so, yeah, I think it's been a long road. I've like done a lot of different things, but I think the people along the way have been like the most exciting. But I also just think it's also hard. Like, theater is not an easy industry for those that like work in it. It's long hours. Like, you're often working 2 or 3 jobs to like make ends meet, or like 60 to 80 hours a week, I think, to like move forward. And, you know, I think for me on the personal side, some of what I also had to balance in my career, because I think when I was younger, I was like, you do anything and everything, you know, and by the time you get older, you have to start making choices. And I think also prioritizing your health. And, you know, I guess it was, yeah, it was like 11 years after I went out to Point Loma, I was actually diagnosed with lupus. And I think that is like synonymous with my like theater career in many ways, because I had to learn how to balance, how to say no, you know, how to, I think, you know, figure out what is the most important to me in my like career, which I think also has now led me to where I'm at now in the Bay Area, working as executive artistic director at a small organization, Playwrights Foundation, which supports and empowers playwrights and the development of new work, where I now live with my husband. But also, before, I feel like nonprofits and the theater industry can be very unsustainable. And so, you know, even before I became like a leader at the organization, I was like, okay, what are the boundaries I have, or what is the culture I want to create at this organization to like thrive and be successful? So yeah, I don't work 80 hours anymore.
Oh,
but
well, that's really fascinating to me, because I feel like it really kind of plays into the fact that, I mean, you were already in that space of mind when we entered 2020, and along came COVID, and we're kind of all experiencing that now too, that like pause of and redistribution of priorities and understanding of what we need to do. And how has that kind of, I mean, obviously that's what the talk is about today. So how did that kind of move along, like change things within your own work at the Playwright Foundation, but then also just like in the greater sense of the theater industry?
Yeah, I mean, I started at Playwrights Foundation literally like 5 months before COVID hit. So I was like, oh, welcome to like being a new leader. Great. But I also think, you know, I mean, theater is all about like gathering in person, live, you know? So the way that we did theater was, it couldn't be anymore, you know? And I think Some people took a pause, you know, a lot of folks started to innovate and do things online. And, you know, we developed, I think, new mediums of like how to create theater in Zoom or through streaming platforms, or like make it look like people in the same space and they're not. You know, but also a lot of organizations had to like lay off people. Artists were out of work. I think it became this period, I think, of also like seeing some of, which I think we're seeing in our country, but also in the theater industry, of like seeing where the inequities lie, you know, and who is hit hardest. And definitely being at an organization that supports artists and playwrights, like I saw that, you know, very deeply. And I saw playwrights who were like struggling to write, you know, or even seeing like, is there a future in this like thing I've dedicated my life to? And then at the same time, I saw resilience and innovation and like exciting things being created, or, you know, power dynamics being removed because people no longer needed an organization for people to see their work. They could like create it online and put it out themselves. And I know a lot of artists that did that, which I think is something that will like continue. Yeah, which I think is like super exciting. I mean, and at Playwrights Foundation, so, you know, March is kind of when all the lockdowns happen, and we have a big new play festival to where we work on new unproduced plays with playwrights and give like development time. So that means they're like in rehearsal with a director and dramaturg and actors and working on the script. And then we have public presentations, which normally in person, but last year we did everything fully online. So it was like, you know, the actors are like virtually coming in from all their different places. We did rehearsals on Zoom, and that is what a lot of the theater industry did, you know, during this time, like a lot of other places, but, you know.
Well, upheaval was definitely not unique for the theater industry. Everybody kind of experienced that, but something I think, you know, I may not have mentioned earlier, I forgot, I'm in the theater industry. I was working at a theater up until March 13th. And then that day it was just, we're closed. And so innovation was the only way forward for this industry. And you've kind of touched on that a little bit. You started to touch on different positions that might have been affected more than others. Did you see that within your own organization?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of grateful. Honestly, we're not a producing organization, meaning like we don't produce full plays. Like we mainly do readings or development work when it's like earlier. And so I was kind of grateful for that, because we could like focus on the human beings and the way that I supported the playwrights. Even sometimes it was like emotional support, or like people needed to gather together, you know, and be in space, as opposed to even always about producing work. I think some of the mind shift that happened also was like, how does the focus go back on the people and like taking care of people as opposed to the product as much? And I think in tandem with that, with the Black Lives Matter movement that happened last year, I think there was a huge reckoning in our industry as well. And so many conversations about inequities, about racism in the field, and like, you know, so many meetings and conversations that I've been in locally and at large of us saying we have to change the way we're doing things. We have to change our practices and become, you know, more anti-racist and inclusive. And it's not easy, but I think a lot of people took this time during COVID to also be looking internally within their organization or themselves as an artist. And figure, you know, I think that for us in the theater industry goes in tandem with like COVID. Is it like, I don't think everybody would have in the same way reevaluated themselves, but there are also artists who, when you're not worried about someone who's going to hire you because there's no jobs, people speak out, I think, a little bit more as well, and, you know, share about things that aren't okay anymore, you know, whereas some of that like power dynamic is kind of, you know, lifted in a way. But even at our organization, we partnered with a couple other organizations to work with artists to train them to be anti-racist trainers, because I think that's something that one, to provide like another way of like income, and in addition, especially when right now like the artistic work isn't as there isn't as much, but I think also seeing that need of like we all need to be training ourselves and like understanding how to implement better practices within the field as well. But yeah, I'm curious for you, Alex, as an artist, also what that experience was like, going from like you're an artist and a teacher, and then all of a sudden couldn't do things the way that you did them before.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, things are still kind of shut down. I mean, as you know, I mean, not for everyone. Large scale productions. Hamilton just opened last night in San Francisco and LA. I don't know it's Broadway yet. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's been a big shift. Obviously, there's 3 of me in the waiting room. I don't know how this keeps happening. Sorry.
I keep wondering if you're joining like 3 times.
I must have shared the link wrong, because some friends keep showing up as me. So anyway, yeah, definitely. Sorry, I got distracted.
Yeah, what it was like for you as an artist and like the beginning of COVID and as things shut down.
Right. Well, it definitely really difficult. I think one of the things that you mentioned is the community and being togetherness of theater. It just doesn't feel the same. And I know a lot of things are this way, but in theater, we build families for one show, and then we dismantle that family, and then we come back together, another family for a show, and it just keeps building. So it's all relational. It's all about community and being together and creating this art that is, even film, it's recorded once, it's done once, and then it's kind of sterile. Like it just stays that one performance. But theater, the art of it, the way that it works, it's live, and every performance is a different performance. It is dynamic in that way. And that is kind of what has been hard to grieve this past year as a performer, as a teacher, is losing that connectivity. Even though that we can do it virtually, there's so many roadblocks to that, and inequities, as you've mentioned. Not everyone has the capabilities to create art in that way. So I think it helps to look at what other inequities, and that's really opened up so much. I mean, I'm speaking of this as a white man who knows that I benefit. I'm a tenor too, so I benefit from a lot of these privileges. And I think it's right now we're all kind of taking a moment to pause and think, how can we open it up and make it more accessible, and hear the stories that everyone needs, hear other people's stories rather than just like white guys' stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been, a lot of even some of the reflection, and how with limited opportunities, who's getting those opportunities, what is the culture that like those stories are being, cultivated in. And I think one of the responsibilities, like I deeply feel at, an organization to where, so for our festival, we have an open selection process. So that means like 750 scripts we received last year. People apply and they want to be in this festival, but also like we put out these semifinalists and finalist lists, and I think there's a responsibility of thinking about what are the stories that are not being told that should be being told, and like how in our selection process are we uplifting those voices, as well as like talking about the practices within how we're producing theater that support diverse work. Which, when I think about like diverse work and voices who haven't been heard, I mean, I think about that in terms of like race and ethnicity. I also think about it in terms of ability and like economic status. And like that term diversity, I think has, a wider a wider lens than always how we're looking at it. But I think for me, that's something that's like very deeply important, of like being in a place and position of, you know, privilege and having this opportunity to uplift folks into the theater world, because a lot of the playwrights that are in our festival, then like theater professionals see them and then want to produce their work. And so always thinking about who are we putting, you know, who are we uplifting and whose voice is being heard. So yeah, I mean, and last year I do have a little clip I want to share with folks, because sometimes when I share with people, like, hey, we like produce theater online and everybody was in their own home. Like, if you haven't seen it, like, people don't understand what that means or what that looks like. And I produced, or I mean, I directed a reading of a play last year. It was called To Saints and Stars by Jordan Ramirez Puckett. And it really centers around this relationship of two women who are really good friends. One is an astronaut and one is a priest's wife, and how they kind of view the world differently. But in the world that they're in, it's in the future, to where, you know, kind of climate change has, like, you know, really moved forward, and to save humanity, there needs to be, you know, people are like doing a mission to Mars, and, like, you know, everybody has their different ideas of how to save humanity. And it really talks about the difference between kind of like science and faith, which I feel like is a lot of what's happening now, you know, of like everybody having different views about how do we save humanity and each other. So I'm gonna show a little clip so that folks can like see what I'm actually talking about, that like sustained theater throughout this time. Oops, hold on. You'll see me intro it just a little bit. Okay. But then we're just gonna see like the opening monologue, which is Sophia, who's an astronaut. She's up in space right now, and she's writing back down to her friend in the scene.
Sit back, get comfortable wherever you are, and enjoy a developmental reading of To Saints and Stars by Jordan Ramirez Puckett.
Sophia stands alone in a pool of light.
They say that in the moments before your death, your life flashes before your eyes, but I see nothing. The nothingness of the whole universe spread out before me, and all I want is a little more time.
Zoe begins lighting candles. John puts on his priest vestments and then lights a hanging incense burner.
Lord, have mercy.
Throughout,
Lord,
John incenses the space. He starts with the altar, then he moves on to the congregation and the narthex. And comes up to Sophia.
I need you in the command module.
5 more minutes.
Riding home?
Trying to.
You gonna hit send this time?
Yes. I don't know. Maybe.
3 minutes. And if you're not strapped in, I'll drag you there myself.
Got it.
And Sophia.
Yeah?
Send the damn email.
Ken floats away.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy.
Dear Z, if this is the last thing you ever hear from me, then let it be this. The universe started with a bang. It's more than a theory. It's an explanation backed by scientific fact. We know that our universe is cooling and expanding at ever-increasing speeds. The only logical conclusion is that everything started from a singular, very dense spot. In the face of all this evidence, how can anyone believe in a creator, in divine intervention?
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have
Because the universe is expanding, the longer we wait, the harder it will be for us to explore this universe. And we need to keep exploring, not in 100 or 50 or even 20 years. We need to push the limits of space exploration if we are going to survive. We have to survive.
mercy.
Wow, that was really cool to see. I wanted to know, was this a project that was created with intention for being done in this way, in this medium, or was it meant to be staged originally?
No, I mean, it was meant, it's like a live theater play, you know, it wasn't like created to be in an online medium, but we took those stories and, you know,
Cool.
visually, yeah, did it virtually. And that's what a lot of theaters have been doing during this time. And this is how like stories were continued to be shared. And for our festival, I mean, we had people who joined us from all around the world. So there's this like positive side of COVID of like, even in this conversation we're having right now, like my grandma is here from Kansas to be able to watch this conversation, which I think is so exciting, you know, in the fact of like, oh, we're able to come together in community in different ways. And like, I think for us with the festival, we were like, okay, how do we still have artistic content? How do we now in this new online medium create community and connection and various things, which was like built into our process. And yeah, so I think there are a lot of, because to me, the future of theater is actually hybrid, and how these things and skills that we have learned don't go away, but like, oh, what it's another like tool in our toolbox of
Right.
like, how do we learn these things or keep these things or like keep this access? Because there are also so many people who weren't able to watch or experience theater who were able to because it was online.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's like one version where people had already written before the pandemic. And then another example I just want to like share with folks if they hadn't like heard about it. And Alex actually reminded me of this, but there was actually a TikTok musical that was like created. And this is like the epitome of like democracy creation, you know, to where one girl's like viral video about Ratatouille the musical started that then had
there should
so
be a
many
musical, right? She was just like,
who
let's do a
knew, you
musical.
know, yeah, that then spurred, you know, Broadway people, regular people, all just like creating these songs for Ratatouille the musical that then was like actually went to the Broadway level. And they did you know, it was like a
artistic
45-minute
renderings.
presentation. Huh?
There was like stage renderings and like all of that, like all the artistic sides
So
of
like
Broadway.
everybody doing it from their home, and they did it for this fundraiser for Broadway Cares and like raised $1 million, which Broadway Cares is an organization that supports theater artists on Broadway who are in need of like health or mental health support. And so during COVID, this was like really important. I'm just going to share like a 30-second like clip of that because I think it's super fun and people should like go watch it. But it's just like another completely different like view of like how did artists create during this time.
On January 1st, 2021, Broadway will say Bon Appetit to Ratatouille the TikTok musical. Join Broadway and TikTok's biggest and brightest talents for a singular, spectacular evening benefiting the Actors Fund. Tickets on sale now exclusively on Today Tix. It's your musical, cooked to perfection. Ratatouille, the TikTok musical.
I like how you put it, democratizing theater. That's greit. Any ideas?
It is though, because usually it's like a couple people that are creating it, and this is like, yeah.
I mean, I know people who have left. I mean, we both know people who have left Broadway because of that. There's people, you know, it's so controlled by just a few. So it's exciting to see what the future. Do you have any other insight as to how you see other? I know that was a far, like, extreme version. Do you have any other ideas of how that might be brought to the people?
You're talking about that specific musical, or
just theater and creation and you know, how do we? I know it's a huge question, and we're all trying to answer that. But how do we actually give the freedom to the people, you know, people who don't have the power to share their stories? How do we do that?
That is a great. question.
Yeah, in fact, Kimberly had asked this. I just saw it in the chat a minute ago. How can leaders and professionals in theater continue those conversations and work to make sure we don't lose that momentum, but that it lasts? I think she worded it better than I did.
Yeah, talking about the social justice movements and COVID, I think specifically.
Yeah. And equity in theater.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think we have to figure out how are we making these daily practices. I'll be honest, because now, like I showed you a little picture of like what like the year when most of us were in lockdown, and now what's happening is like the industry is starting to open up, you know, and people are trying to create theater within these like COVID safety restrictions, which are actually very hard right now, but like people trying to gather artists in space and like, you know, there's all these conversations about like requiring vaccines or like negative COVID tests if people are coming together in person. And I think there's this, I mean, we're all tired, you know, but like there is so much innovation that is having to happen at every step of the way. Sometimes you fall back into old patterns, you know, and I think is the key for us in the theater industry, but I also think every human being of like, how are we not falling into old patterns, but like taking forward what we've learned and like, you know, I know for me, like I have to have like accountability groups or like what are leaders that I'm in conversation with so that we can like continue to keep this forefront, because I feel like we're never going to get to the point to where we're saying like justice and equity and equality is that we have reached it, you know, like I think we are always going to be having to move forward or shifting or, you know, restructuring the world, because I think like power wants power, you know, and that's like what wants to be and to exist. And I think we always have to be fighting against that humane desire. So some of that is esoteric, but for me, I feel like how does social justice movement, when it's so big, I'll speak from the personal, I get so overwhelmed by it. And sometimes like, I'm never going to be able to like succeed or make a difference. And when I take it down to little bite-sized things or like daily practices or reading books or being in community with people or like, you know, to where you can talk about the challenges, I think for me, that's the practice, you know, I've had to try to implement in addition to self-care. Like none of us can get through COVID or like trying to bring justice into this world if we're not taking care of ourselves, like because you won't have the like mental and emotional strength. And I think that's something I've learned the hard way. But yeah, advice I feel like I would share, but also continuing to learn myself of like, what does that mean?
Cool. Well, we're gonna wrap some stuff up. Oh, I was just gonna say this, Kimberly. If anyone has questions, go ahead and share them in here. I'm gonna ask one kind of last question while you guys formulate any questions you might have. But just going forward in the world of theater, you know, we have vaccinations now. I know it's hard to predict because this is so dynamic; it's always changing. But what do you think? Just from your perspective, what do you think are some things that might change? What are some things that are, you know, that are maybe going to stay with us? And what are you excited also to go back to?
I mean, hopefully one day excited to like be in a room and not be afraid. Which I think still exists a little bit. Like this summer we did a hybrid festival to where like everything was online still, but we like brought the playwrights into San Francisco and like watched in a theater. It was like we were at a movie theater almost. And there was something so powerful about being back in space and hearing people laugh together and like have conversation. And I was like, oh my God, this is like what I've missed. Like when we're on Zoom, you're like muted. You know, like it feels like you're like monologuing. That's why today I was like, can someone be in conversation with me? Because I like don't want to be muted and like just be like speaking into a void sometimes and I think that's what I've like deeply missed, but I also hope like as we bring that in-person community back, we don't forget this like hybrid online world that has created a lot of access and like reach to be able to bring stories to so many more people. And I just think the theater industry is like forever changed by COVID. Like we've talked about like, you know, COVID like made us do things as an industry we never would have done before, because so many people are like, no, you have to be in the like theater live. But what I think you also find is like people can experience it from home and then they also want to be there live.
Right. I mean, there was a lot of pushback in the beginning, you know, for the first few weeks when I was still part of the company that I was working for, a lot of pushback in streaming live performances that had been archived, because that's not what theater is, you know, but now that's kind of shifted and we kind of understand that like that makes it accessible and is kind of going to change the things. I think the theaters who are going to be successful going forward are going to be what you said, a hybrid opportunity, and those that aren't are going to be going back, the ones that are trying to stay in the past. So yeah, definitely. Another one here from Brenda Cunningham. How can we help as audiences? I'm going to Hamilton this month here in San Francisco. That's exciting. Jealous.
That is exciting, Brenda. You know, this may seem simple, but like, I'm just thinking as you like going into a space, like following whatever COVID safety protocols that they have at the theater. I mean, we hear stories of people not fully following them, you know, even though they're in place to like create safety. And so I think, yeah, just having like audience members support in that way. And also, yeah, I mean, I think we're all on a learning journey. And so I think we've had conversations of how do we bring our audiences into this conversation about anti-racism, equity, and inclusion in different ways. And so I just like always encourage people like how they're doing their own learning, but that's like a big conversation we're having now as like audiences are being invited back.
Another one here. What makes a good script? What stories do you hope to see on the stage in the near future?
Oh man, what makes a good script? I mean, it is such a subjective question, because I think anyone you ask that question will like have a different answer. But I think for me, it's often like, does something move me in some way? You know, do I walk away being like, I've never heard this story told in this way, you know? So like looking for things that are unique and new, and maybe I also like learned something. Like I think theater is one of those things like you're able to open up your own worldview or see your like experiences reflected back in some way. So you know, I think those are a couple things that I would like point to.
Another one here. What advice might you have for someone wanting to get started in the industry for the first time?
Advice.
Like think of those PLNU students like we were, with big smiles graduating in the Greek.
I know, graduating into like the COVID era. I mean, my honest response and reaction to that is like, this is not an easy time. You know, I think it's not an easy time for anyone. And so like, I don't envy you, I think, but I also think, and I remember this in San Diego as PLNU students, you know, started going out into theater, like people really liked working with us, and because we were good people. Yeah. Like what I would encourage you to do is like be an honest, good person who like works hard at anything you do, even if that's like, I was going to say getting someone coffee, but in this world, it might not be getting someone coffee. You know, and I think just being really willing to learn, you know, I think starting out, there still are internship opportunities, there's fellowship opportunities, you know, that theaters are starting up again. And I think that those are like great places to build connections and to get out into the world and also just like see theater. There's so much stuff happening online. Like there's so much you can access right now. It's almost a little overwhelming,
Yes.
but like,
I've kind of found that, to be honest, but yeah, it's great.
yeah. It's a little overwhelming, but I mean, we worked with interns, and especially in our online one, we were able to work with people all over the country, you know, and it was like really exciting. And I actually think some of the younger generation is going to be better set up for the future as we like move through, because I do think it's this hybrid world, and older theater professionals have a really hard time pivoting and understanding the technology. So like, I would also be like, yes, you're in person like theater world, but like also this online world, I think is here to stay in some form or fashion as we move through COVID, because I don't know if others have started to say this phrase, but like, I don't think COVID is going away. We're learning how to live with COVID until it like becomes more part like a flu or things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I got distracted by another question.
I know, and I think it's a really great question. Is there an existing, thanks Janelle, is there an existing production that you hope to work on one day, or, you know, maybe a revival production of an old show that isn't in production?
Good question. I don't.
No dream shows in your back pocket. I get
There's
that question all the time.
I know. I feel like I should have something. I'll be honest. I'm just like thinking about like getting through the next day sometimes.
Totally.
I think, you know, I also don't always operate in the existing world. I operate in this new play world of like always looking at what are the new stories that are being created.
Totally.
So I may shift the question a little bit in,
yeah,
you know, thinking about what is the kind of theater I want to work on when we like come back into space. And I think about us in a, and there are stories like this, but like I want to be working on an in the space that if we are gathered there in the room, it's not as much about like, oh, we're going to sit quietly, you know, and watch this production, you know, because that's what we've been doing for like almost 2 years. Like, what is the interaction? What is the connection? You know, and I know playwrights that are writing these kind of things, you know, that are involving the audience more, you know, or even sometimes you're like not even in a traditional theater space, but you're like, you know, outdoors somewhere. Like to me, I'm like really yearning for more like visceral connection, which I think theater brings in a completely different way than like TV and film does.
Any other?
Also, for anybody who is interested in Come From Away,
oh yeah,
they actually filmed a movie of it. So on the Broadway stage here during COVID, and it is releasing on Apple TV on September 10th. And so for Come From Away, from folks that don't know it, it's a story about this little town in Canada called Gander, Newfoundland, to where on 9/11, 28 planes were diverted to this town of 10,000 people, and they took care of, you know, those people. And so it's this story of like how humanity comes together during tragedy. And yeah, so like now that this is the exciting thing, something like that probably wouldn't have happened because of COVID. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, this story and these people that I love, like I can watch in my living room, like whatever I want is like,
and
super
I haven't
exciting
seen it yet either. I've only heard it, so I'm so excited. Well,
yeah,
it's been so exciting. I don't know, Kimber, to chat with you today, Jessica, and I don't know if anyone else has any last questions, or Kimberly, if you want to jump in with any questions.
Thank you, Jessica and Alex. I've so enjoyed this conversation. As an outsider, you know, somebody a little bit removed from the theater world, but someone who so appreciates theater, I love that this seems like a really challenging time, but also a really exciting time. And I appreciate the hope and the excitement and the optimism that the both of you are bringing to this space. So I just hope you know that we're proud and we're grateful of the good work that you're doing, and we'll be praying for you, and we're excited to see what's next. Yeah.
Thanks, Kimberly.
I don't think any more questions are coming in. I, again, just so appreciate the conversation. We are going to continue to gather in this virtual space, but also at regional meetups. And it's actually exciting. We're having a meetup in the Northern California area this Saturday. Alex will be there. I wish I could be there. Alex, do you want to share a little bit about that gathering?
Well, yeah, so this coming Saturday at 6:30 in Vallejo. It's going to be at the New Life Church of the Nazarene in Vallejo. And it's going to be an evening screening of the musical Newsies, Disney's Newsies. So for any families or anybody who would like to come and join us, there should be a good group of us there. We're going to be having some tacos. I think you can still register through tomorrow. Is that right, Kimberly? So, I mean, you can just show up too, but if you want some tacos, you're going to need to register. It's $10 for taco dinner, or just free if you just want to show up. So again, it's at 6:30. There's a link there in the chat. Is that it, right? Yeah,
yes.
okay. There's a link
in the chat box, pointloma.edu/Loma Talks. You can sign up for this Saturday's event or join us for an upcoming Loma Talk. And just a reminder that this recording will also be made available on YouTube, so you can send it to your friends. And again, thank you for joining us as the Point Loma community. I really believe that we're better together and we'll get through this strange time. And thank you, Jessica, for being with us today. Awesome. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.